Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome back William Lynes. He's a urologist. His KevinMD article is titled Lazarus, the Dead Man Brought Back to Life. William, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for inviting me back. It's a pleasure talking to you.
For those who didn't listen to our first episode together, just briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Well, I'm a retired Stanford-trained physician. I'm a board-certified urologist. I'm an author. I write primarily fiction in the form of medical thrillers. My two recent books include A Surgeon's Knot and Winterborn. And in addition to that, I'm a speaker, an advocate, and a survivor of physician burnout and suicide. And specific to our topic today, I'm a Bible-believing, born-again Christian. So that's sort of my story.
All right. Now, you mentioned that you're an author as well. So how did you get into writing?
I started writing when I was in practice. I first wrote a fantasy adventure story with my children as the main characters. And then when I retired, I decided to write really about medical practice and thrillers. So that's how I got into it.
All right, excellent. All right, so let's talk about your most recent KevinMD article, Lazarus, the Dead Man Brought Back to Life. Tell us, how did this article come together?
Well, a while back, I got a phone call, I believe on a Saturday night, from my pastor. And he was going to give a sermon on Lazarus on a Sunday. And he asked me a lot of probing questions about the scripture, and it caused me to read. It's described in John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. His main questions were, how do we know that Lazarus was dead and raised from the grave?
All right, so for those who aren't familiar with the Bible, just give us a little bit of background as to who Lazarus was and what his story was.
Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. He was the brother of Mary and Martha, who are described in the Gospels as well. He fell deathly ill. It's not clear from the scriptures what was wrong with him, but in the essay that I wrote, I proposed that he had sepsis from some particular cause, such as pneumonia. And Mary and Martha asked Jesus to come and heal Lazarus. Well, Jesus arrived 6 days later. Unfortunately, he had died 4 days before. They had buried him actually in a tomb with burial clothes. There was multiple witnesses to his death, including the learned people of the time, like the Pharisees. Jesus said that he wanted the stone of the tomb rolled away. There was a lot of discussion about how there would be a death stench, which suggests that there was decomposition of the body. Jesus rose him from the grave, and we know that partly because he appears in John chapter 12 later on, and the Pharisees are actually threatening to execute Lazarus because the story of Lazarus raised from the dead was such a powerful testimony. So that's the story of Lazarus, and I hopefully was helpful to my pastor in describing those things.
All right. So you talk about how Lazarus potentially had sepsis. So go more into his illness.
Well, we know that he was deathly ill, and we don't know from scripture very much more than that. Because he fell ill on a short-term basis, I proposed that he had sepsis from a pneumonia or from a plague, but we don't really know that. That's really just sort of my supposition.
So what kind of symptoms did he have from the scriptures that would make you potentially think that?
Cough, fever, primarily those two.
All right. So what happens next in terms of the story?
Well, Lazarus came out of the tomb. There was, quite a commotion, and many people, including many Pharisees, believed in Jesus and his godly origin. And it's one of the major miracles in Jesus' ministry.
All right. So after going through the story, analyzing his death, what are some things that we can learn from all of this?
Well, I think that the primary thing is that Jesus is God and that there is power in Jesus Christ, and that the scripture is a powerful source of the events in Jesus's ministry. So those are the things that I think that you can sort of take home from this message.
All right. So, in terms of the appearance of the body that made one think that Lazarus was dead, any specifics from the scripture that would kind of confirm his death?
The main thing is that those around him were very concerned about a deathly stench,
Hmm.
which is only seen in death and decompensation of the body. So sometime in those 4 days in which he was in the tomb, at least people were concerned that this was happening. Now, when Jesus rose him from the dead and he exited the tomb, from the scripture, he was perfect in terms of his skin and the smell and so forth. There's no evidence that there was any residual decompensation. So
So
that's about all we know.
let's talk about your interest in this story and the medical origins of the story. So, what did you learn? Anything that surprised you as you researched deeper into Lazarus's death?
Well, the main thing is that Lazarus was dead. Now, through the 2,000 years since this event, many people have talked about Lazarus as being ill.
Hmm.
Now, we know he wasn't ill because he was buried. And these are learned people at the time. They don't bury ill people, they bury dead people. And so that's the thing that was most clear to me. There's other issues in that Jesus took 6 days to get there. This probably was an attempt to actually demonstrate his power, and so that's very interesting to me as well.
So, as you read the Bible and the scriptures, any other medical parables that you can glean from it? Anything from a medical standpoint that we can learn from reading the Bible?
Well, in regards to Jesus' ministry, of course, there are many examples of his healing powers with lepers, with paralyzed people, and so that's interesting to me as a Christian, as a physician.
All right. So, what's next? What's your next project when it comes to your writing, in terms of that connection between the scripture and the Bible and medicine? What's next on your
Yes.
plate?
Well, right now I have two books that have come out in the last year, which are medical thrillers. Each of them has a Christian subplot to them. A Surgeon's Knot is a story about a surgery intern's internship year,
Hmm.
and he becomes involved in substance abuse and becomes a Christian. And then the other book is Winterborn, which is a medical thriller, and there's some Christian elements to it. But what I'm excited about with those two books is just recently my publisher and I have collaborated on changing the covers. And in fact, just today we've finalized the covers. So and the idea behind that is to relaunch their marketing. And so I've been real involved in that, and I'm quite excited to see the data supporting hopefully an improved marketing.
So, for those physicians who are interested in writing, perhaps publishing fiction novels like yourself, what are some tips that you could
Mhm.
share with them?
Well, the publishing world is difficult. I've been writing for over 30 years, and I have self-published 6 novels,
Hmm.
and then I have three novels published by a traditional publisher. Just to be persistent, don't take the word of one publisher. I read a book once about publishing a book. How do you publish a book? And the woman who wrote the book said that you send out 10, queries
Hmm.
a time over and over again. So you don't just send 10, you send 10, you get 10 rejections, you send 10 more. And that's really I've found through the years to be true. I've also come to the conclusion, as John Grisham, the author, has, that writing the book is the easy part, marketing the book is the difficult part.
Sure.
And it's something that I'm not good at, unfortunately.
Now, how did you learn? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a publisher to help guide you?
Well, not much in the way of mentor, just sort of working on my own. Now, for about 3 years, I've been working with a publisher, a small publisher in Texas called Black Rose Writing, and they've been very helpful. But to spend many years just sort of cranking it out myself.
Now, you mentioned as part of your story that you were burnt out. Tell us how writing helped you through that.
Oh, gee, really, I'm a survivor of multiple suicide attempts associated with physician burnout, and I've been retired. I retired after my third suicide attempt, really because I knew that I practicing medicine and my existence were not compatible. And my writing has allowed me to do two things. One is to tell a story of the medical profession. I'm very interested in writing about surgical training. A surgeon's knot is about a surgery internship, exactly like I went through. And then the other thing that writing has allowed me to do is I do write some nonfiction, yeah, in regards to physician burnout. And so writing has been very, very therapeutic in my life.
We're talking to William Lynes. He's a urologist. His KevinMD article is titled Lazarus, the Dead Man Brought Back to Life. And my final question, William, tell us some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience.
I would leave it really with what I just said, that Jesus Christ, I believe, is God, and that he is powerful, and that the Bible is God's inherent word, and it is very demonstrative in the ministry of Jesus, and in God's plan for humanity.
William, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Kevin, thanks. Thank you very much, Kevin.